After my 10-year marriage to her best friend ended, I filed for divorce and battled for custody. After years of courting, my 37-year-old wife, Rachel, and I were joined in marriage 10 years ago. I consider my marriage to be the most wonderful thing I have ever experienced, and our happy little 6-year-old daughter just makes it better. As a professional baker, Rachel has a modest home-based company creating cupcakes and pastries. I work in a medical facility, therefore my calendar is constantly busy, because I occasionally have to work over the holiday season. I value my time spent with my family very much. I thus spend all of my free time with my family. Although there have never been any significant problems in our marriage, I feel like the spark has faded during the past 3 to 4 months. Our sexual life is vibrant, but emotionally it seems so empty. She used to give me time while I was at home. She would sit with us, exchanging gossip and talking about our days. It was a lot of fun. She barely ever asks me about my day now, or shares hers with me. Our relationship doesn't seem to be the same as it once was. Riley, her best friend, entered, and that's when everything started. He had returned to the city not long ago. He spent 15 years residing in a separate nation. Even though I had only met him once at our wedding, Rachel had taught me a lot about him. The tales of their time at school. Now that he's moved to the city, that person lives on the next street. I've seen him at our house occasionally, if not frequently, since then. Our relationship has completely collapsed since his entrance. Riley spends a lot of time in my place with Rachel, typically staying for supper. Rachel and I aren't actually spending any quality time together because of how intrusive his presence has become. I have had enough of this garbage. I want to talk to her, but I think it will be difficult to get through to her given the way she is acting. However, this was the only option available, clearly. I had the day off last week. I got up earlier than she did and assisted her in baking. She had a happy disposition today, and I was relieved to learn that Riley would not be arriving on that particular day. I saw that as a chance to talk to her about my concerns. I asked her if I could chat to her about something that was upsetting me while we were eating lunch. "Go ahead," she said. I asked her whether everything was well between us after initially being afraid to do so. She gave me a nod and assured me that everything was well. So why should I ask? She was informed it wasn't. I faced my worries about Riley living with us, and that we wouldn't have any privacy of our own. I made it clear that I don't dislike Riley, he seemed like a lovely guy, but what I was really trying to express was that I wanted to spend my free time, dinner, and leisure with my wife and children, alone. Even though she was paying close attention to me, she became upset when I phoned. Riley, a stranger. She said that Riley was a part of her life, and that she had known him for a long time before I did. Riley lives alone, so what's the big deal if he hangs around and has dinner with us, she thought. He usually grabs groceries on the way and doesn't eat complimentary meals. I pulled away from the chat since it wasn't going the way I wanted it to. She promised to make sure I'm not left out of the relationship. However, I must equally acknowledge that Riley was a dear friend of hers who had been absent for a long time and was only now getting back in touch. There was no cause for insecurity over it. To be honest, I didn't feel particularly good about anything. The talk was everything but comforting, and I felt deeply annoyed by her concern for his sentiments while putting my needs last. Riley was strolling in the direction of my house when I got up to go outside and cool down. I forced a grin, even though I didn't want to see him right then and there, and I led him inside. Her face lit up the instant she saw Riley, and she hugged him like it was the first time in years. Despite his lack of request, she offered him food after asking him to calm down. Seeing him in that state was really strange, and I felt like I was losing control. I approached him at the table and struck up a conversation. Now that he's living alone, I mockingly suggested to him that he should learn how to cook. Rachel sent me a stern look as he became uneasy and answered slowly. "Whoa, I knew it was coming." Riley departed, and she gave me a hard time for making him seem bad. She referred to me as careless, insensitive, insecure, and other derogatory terms. I was shocked when she quickly said that I was accusing her of infidelity. I informed her that even though he always showed up for dinner, which is our family time, I felt uneasy about his spending so much time at my place. I'm not even implying that she cheated. She stormed out of the conversation and shut herself in the room when she ran out of things to say. I was becoming irritated. I was excited to spend time with my family after a busy week, and Rachel had no problem flaunting her fit. We spent the entire day pouting in one another's eyes. Riley showed up during supper again, which really irritated me. As we ate supper, Rachel was giggling and chatting to him, just as happy as before. In front of my own family, at home, I felt non-existent. He was all in as well. Praising her and seeking validation from me, I grinned and nodded. What other options did I have? He informed her that, as she aged, her beauty had been bestowed with maturity, and she had grown much hotter. He was ecstatic as he described how, although he preferred her black straight hair over blonde, He was completely smitten with her throughout his college years. He wanted to know my opinion on her hair. I thought she was gorgeous in every way. It makes no difference if she dyes it black or stays blonde. She's always really beautiful. I'm kissing her hand because I adore her. She grew uncomfortable and got up from the table, stating she had to go to the kitchen for something. Riley fell silent after that as well. Rachel looked at me after he was gone. I couldn't figure it out. I asked her whether I was done making fun of her. Had no idea that my wife would find it uncomfortable to have me publicly declare my love for her and to kiss her hand in front of her closest friend. What sort of warped reasoning was it, really? She claimed that I had purposefully undermined her closest buddy. Hold on, what? This is absurd. How on earth does that make sense? She reached for a dish, intending to crush it. Nonetheless, she left the living room after that. She eventually returned to the room in an attempt to apologize, but by then I had had enough for one day. She persisted on having another talk, even though I attempted to avoid it. I needed to spend a few quiet hours before leaving for the next week. I needed some time to myself. I merely said I needed some fresh air and left the home, but she tried to gaslight me. I got in my car and headed out. Thinking she would have fallen asleep, I returned about 1 a.m. to hear her laughing over the phone. As soon as she saw me, she hung up the phone and cuddled under the blanket. I inquired as to her conversation partner. She mentioned that a frequent client called to place an order. Really? Was the client phoning her at this late hour? She leaped so far ahead of me that I thought it was Riley. Of course I was, but I went to my bed instead of answering her. She gave me a back rub, apologized once again for her actions, and admitted that she had said it on purpose to make fun of me. She caressed me while kissing me, and our relationship heated up. She took birth control tablets after the intercourse. I inquired if she would be against having a second kid. Planning for the second child seemed appropriate because our daughter is 6 years old and I wanted to have 2 children. She looked at me with contempt, telling me that taking care of our kid was already very stressful because of her allergic asthma and that she didn't want to harm her body anymore. Due to her allergic asthma from birth, our daughter needs constant attention as well as a list of do's and don'ts. I am aware that our kid needs particular attention, but we cannot treat her cruelly or disparage her in such a way as parents. She rolled her eyes and remarked that, because I'm not really accessible after work, I shouldn't be commenting because it was she who was looking after her. I married a different Rachel than her. The weekend came to a terrible finish. I contacted Rachel the next day about something, but she didn't answer. I felt uneasy about it. It is usual for people to not respond, even if there was no need for concern. I became aware of how anxious I was becoming by overanalyzing. I usually assume in the back of my mind that she is with him, which is why she isn't answering. I was starting to find it annoying. In the evening I returned, and Rachel's fresh appearance startled me. Her hair had been jet black colored by her. Riley made a statement the day before that she seemed better. You see, the following day she did it. She had black hair. From that, what else should I read? Had Riley visited? I questioned her. She answered no, but it had to be for Riley since I noticed some leftover coconut cookies in the kitchen. She informed me that when he was a college student, she used to make his favorite coconut biscuits for him. It was clearly for him, as my daughter and I don't enjoy them. Nevertheless, I couldn't resist picturing Riley's reaction when he saw Rachel with black hair. I wanted to know how Riley felt about her new hair color. She replied that she had colored her hair for me, and that he hadn't seen it yet. One another falsehood. She's been telling everyone for the past 10 years how much she likes her blonde hair, but with one statement she abruptly changed it. She undoubtedly looked stunning with black hair as well, but as you can see, she didn't choose it. Her best buddy enjoyed it that way, so she did it. I'm not going to assume that she is unfaithful to me, though. Our marriage is 10 years old. My daughter is raised by her. It is her who is our daughter's full-time carer. Furthermore, I can never just make up an accusation against her. However, I'm bothered by these minute details, and I don't want to be naive and ignore them until they become out of control. Riley's abrupt declaration that he prefers her black hair and her subsequent coloring of it raises some red flags, to be sure. And occasionally people come over for supper. But when might you start to feel like you're pressuring a family by following social cues? Unless, that is, she really wants him there. Thus this man is only carrying out his instructions and gradually evicting you from your own house. First update, everyone, my worst nightmare came true. Things were sporadic after my previous report for a few months, but I eventually realized Riley's visits were decreasing. When I questioned Rachel about him, she laughed to tell me that Riley had a girlfriend. He doesn't arrive at our house as he is preoccupied with her. I am quite happy. Gullible me. Riley was not going home, but his presence was felt anyway. Rachel was always on the phone, sending photographs, sending texts, and laughing, as though he had a greater influence on her life than any of us. She would make up ridiculous justifications, such as saying Riley was on a date at a fine restaurant and showing her the images if she was seen ignoring our daughter or being distracted by her device. In the event that this failed, she could always assign responsibility for her interactions with the client to the consumer. I urged her to set her phone aside so she could spend time with our kid, but I put up with it for as long as I could before it got to be too much. Annoyed, she set down her phone and attempted to focus on our baby even though her thoughts were on the phone. It buzzed all the time. She was among us, but her thoughts and eyes were fixed on the phone screen. She informed me that she had just added a few photos on her bakery page and was receiving direct messages for orders when I asked her who she was messaging. That didn't make things better, and things have gotten drier than they were even though we haven't argued since. She doesn't even get close to me anymore. She would become upset with me if I tried to start. Either that, or she was just exhausted. It was really unlike her to start dressing up so much even though she was at home. I spotted her getting ready for work one day as I was leaving. She had on a new outfit, her hair was done properly, and a lot of cosmetics. I assumed she would require assistance. I asked her if she was going anywhere, if she wanted me to drop her off, or if she needed my car. She became agitated and declared her intention to stay put. She looked at me, perplexed, and said, "What now? Not even for myself can I get dressed up." It was pointless to argue with her. I decided to let it go and go off to work since she would think anything she wanted to and my explanation would not make her change her opinion. She seemed to be concentrating more on Riley than on me, and there was nothing I could do to cheer her up. Throughout our 10 years of marriage, she never done such things, and I was never a dominating spouse. However, for the last few months, our marriage has taken a terrible turn. On this you too must concur. You always feel nervous and irritated because you have no idea why your partner is acting in this way. Another time, she ordered me to take care of our daughter and return home early because she had to go to a friend's party. With pleasure I concurred. She was so broken from the party that she could hardly move. How she managed to drive back safely is a mystery. I put her to bed. I saw that she had red bruises on her thighs while getting dressed. She wasn't in the right state to speak, but my mind was racing with various theories. After tucking her into bed, I spent the entire night restless. I questioned her about the red area on her inner thigh the next morning. She said she could have found a table by accident. She can't recall. Her response was so informal that I got the impression she knew the answer beforehand. Days went by, and nothing changed, not even when I confided in someone or faced my fears. She could be so sassy on some days and so lovable on others. We had very little sex life and were emotionally distant from one another. She was absent or occupied with her phone for half the time, and she had also lost interest in our daughter. I peeked at the passcode on her phone yesterday when she was unlocking it for our kid. I browsed through her gallery on her phone after I got her to sleep. I looked everything over, but I couldn't locate anything. Riley was missing from all the applications that I had looked through. It seemed strange to me, and my first idea was of a personal safe. His name appeared as I typed it. However, both the photographs and the chats were closed. A major red signal were the closed conversations. Why would she act in such way? The pieces fell into place, and it was clear that she was lying to me, alongside him. The next day, today, I intended to face her immediately, but I had to rush to the hospital after receiving an emergency call from a patient when I woke up. My daughter's school called me 6 times while I was responding to my patient. When I phoned them back, they asked me to bring her medications to the school right away. She experienced an asthma attack. For emergencies, we always had an additional pack of pumps and medications in the car. Thankfully, I was able to assign my patient to a different physician, provide all the required instructions over the phone, and head straight to the school. I arrived there just on schedule. My daughter appeared to have a serious illness. When I wasn't answering, I shouted at the authorities that they ought to have phoned Rachel. The police blasted at me, saying they'd tried calling Rachel at least 100 times, but she never answered. I was the reason they needed to call. Fortunately, I got there before they called the ambulance since they were waiting for a response from me. We were nonetheless referred to as negligent and irresponsible parents. I gave my daughter breast milk till her health improved. I had to return to the hospital and was attempting to phone Rachel to beg her to come get our kid from school, but she was not picking up. I went to drop Rachel off at her house since our daughter wanted to relax, and I couldn't wait for Rachel to answer. Riley's vehicle was in our driveway when I arrived home. I had an unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. My kid stayed in the car with me as I slipped inside. Rachel was moaning loudly as I walked inside, and she stopped as soon as she saw someone was there. I opened the bedroom door with a boom and saw what I had been dreading for a long time. I left without saying anything stupid at the moment. I was at a loss for what to do when I saw my kid outside in the car, recuperating after an asthma episode. My daughter slept in my cabin while I drove her to the hospital, and I later took her to my parents' place. She kept wanting to see her mother, but I informed her that she would have to remain with her grandparents until her mother returned from her trip. Rachel is texting me non-stop, wondering how our baby is doing and how happy she is to be with her grandparents. Presumably, she had informed the school about her asthma episode by calling back. In addition, I've requested my attorney to draft divorce documents. I don't want to give it any second thought. I'm over her disrespectful actions. A parent's biggest dread occurs when music starts to play. I apologize so much. Op. How terrifying must have been for you and your kid, I cannot fathom. That she would act with such recklessness towards your medically dependent kid, and then just a short time after to confirm your wife's adultery? She is a complete idiot. We are grateful that you could take time out from work to care for your daughter. The fantasy world your wife is living in is absolutely out of control. And she's forgetting that your daughter is the most important thing. Hello everyone, and welcome to Update 2. I apologize for the delayed release of this information. I eventually got rid of her while I was preoccupied with the divorce procedure. I assumed I would settle down after writing the last post, but I felt agitated and nervous all the time. Furthermore, Rachel's constant messages and calls were irritating me. I wanted to blow up because I was so angry. I took the solo drive home. She was making up a lot of falsehoods while sobbing, reminding her that she would receive the divorce papers in less than a week and that she would never get to see our kid. I ordered her to stop talking. She begged me to consider our kid and refrain from taking any drastic action. I screamed at her to stop acting worried. When our kid experienced an allergic reaction, she should not have been concerned about my daughter at all, as she was busy effing with her closest buddy. How could she have missed the calls if that was her claim? Because she was effing her closest buddy and having the time of her life. Her live demonstration confirmed my suspicions about their murky alliance, which I had been harboring all along. She continued to act, mumbling and begging for one final opportunity as if she were a mad woman. I questioned her about the bruises on her thighs the other day while we were arguing. She called me insane and was brimming with pride. She was acting when she was discovered. I also gave her complete permission to EF Riley as much as she pleased. She became incensed at my remarks, behaving as though she were, and promised to bring a case to get full custody of our daughter. I challenged her to give it a go. I returned home a few days later to pick up some belongings. She attempted to woo me. I caved in after a time of resistance. I felt wild, even though I know I'll be considered lame. I wanted to pour out all of my suffering on her. I was quite harsh with her. She didn't stop me even though she was surprised to discover me that way. When we were through, she asked whether I was going to put an end to the divorce proceedings, and I said no. She stated I used her and sent me a dejected look. She wasn't useful to me. There was nothing that could have prevented me from divorcing her, therefore it was foolish of her to consider buying me off with sex. After 10 or 12 days, she received the divorce papers. Her parents made an unsuccessful attempt to resolve the conflict. To cut me off, she applied for our daughter's whole custody, but Rachel's school officials testified about her recklessness, that I was the one who arrived, even though I was late, and that Rachel was missing and unresponsive when they called during an emergency. It was me who attended the parent-teacher conferences, which Rachel was also missing. My daughter was given custody of her and permitted to see her on the weekends. Rachel had grown much gentler and more present with our kid following the divorce. We would have had a positive outcome if she had taken the same action at that time. However, at that time she behaved like a queen, and she was due. After then, I never heard of Riley again. As for me, I'm preoccupied with looking after my baby and spending quality time with my parents. Op, you are absolutely correct. If only she had shown more concern and presence earlier. Furthermore, she dared to urge you to keep your daughter in mind. The greatest thing for you and your daughter is this divorce. She was a self-centered idiot who usually ends up with little, because she is a selfish person. Best wishes to you and your daughter. Op, you're capable of this. How do you interpret this? Regarding Riley, how would you have responded? We appreciate you coming here today. You ensure you don't miss our upcoming video. Please make sure you press the notification bell, like and subscribe. Until we meet again.